3 minutes. That's how long it took for them to destroy 5 years of my life. 5 years of overtime, canceled vacations, and missed family dinners, all erased in a 180-second meeting where they couldn't even look me in the eye. "We're bringing in someone with a fresh perspective," they said. Translation: they were replacing me with a man who called himself a business transformation guru and wore meditation beads to board meetings. I didn't cry when they told me. I didn't beg. I simply smiled, nodded, and started planning. My name is Diane Mercer, and this is the story of how I watched my former company burn to the ground and toasted marshmallows over the flames. I suppose I should start with who I was before everything fell apart. Senior Strategy Director at Helios Innovations, a mid-sized tech company that had been steadily growing under my financial guidance for half a decade. I wasn't just good at my job, I was exceptional. I'd increased company profits by 37% year over year, spearheaded our expansion into 3 new markets, and personally secured our largest client to date, a $40 million contract with one of the biggest names in healthcare. My performance reviews were stellar. My team respected me, and I genuinely thought I was on track to make CFO within 2 years. Then Jackson Price arrived. He swept in like a hurricane in designer loafers, all charisma, buzzwords, and TED Talk energy. The CEO, Richard Westlake, met him at some executive retreat in Aspen and became instantly infatuated. Jackson had apparently revolutionized 3 companies with his disruptive methodology and quantum business approach, whatever the hell that meant. At first, he was just a consultant. I didn't feel threatened. I'd seen his type before. They come in, make fancy slide decks filled with meaningless graphs, collect their exorbitant fees, and disappear. But Jackson was different. He didn't just advise, he infiltrated. Within a month, he had an office next to Richard's. Within 2, he was sitting in on executive meetings. By month 3, he was questioning my financial strategies in front of the entire board. "With all due respect to Diane's conventional approach," he'd say with that smug smile, "we need to think quantum, not linear. The future isn't in steady growth, it's an exponential disruption." I'd counter with actual numbers, market research, risk assessments, reality. But reality wasn't sexy. Reality didn't promise overnight billions or revolutionary change. Reality was just me, a woman in her 40s with a finance degree and a decade of experience, trying to keep a good company profitable. The day they let me go was a Tuesday, April 12th. I remember because it was my daughter Emma's birthday, and I'd promised to leave work early to help set up her party. Instead, I spent the afternoon clearing out my desk while Jackson watched from Richard's office, already planning how to rearrange my furniture. "We're restructuring the financial division," HR explained mechanically. "Your position is being absorbed into a new role under Mr. Price's direction. We're offering you 6 weeks severance." 6 weeks for 5 years. I signed the papers, declined the exit interview, and walked out with a cardboard box containing 5 years of my professional life. As I passed Jackson in the hallway, he had the audacity to say, "I hope there are no hard feelings, Diane. The universe has bigger plans for you." The universe had bigger plans, all right, but not the kind he was imagining. I didn't go straight home. I couldn't face Emma with red eyes in that pathetic box. Instead, I drove to Willowbrook Park, sat on a bench overlooking the lake, and let myself feel everything: the rage, the humiliation, the fear, for exactly 1 hour. Then I dried my eyes, reapplied my lipstick, and made 2 decisions. First, I would never let Emma see how deeply this had wounded me. Second, I would watch Jackson Price and Richard Westlake destroy everything they had taken from me. The latter wouldn't require any sabotage on my part. I knew exactly what Jackson would do. His quantum business approach was a recipe for disaster for a company like Helios. All I needed to do was wait and document the collapse. I went home, helped Emma blow out her 13 candles, and smiled through the entire party. That night, after she went to bed, I created a new email address and signed up for Google Alerts on Helios Innovations, Jackson Price, and Richard Westlake. Then I opened a bottle of wine and made a toast to the future ruins of what had once been my professional home. The first warning signs appeared faster than even I had anticipated. Just 3 weeks after my departure, Helios announced a bold new direction. They were pivoting from their core business of customized enterprise software to become a digital transformation ecosystem. In layman's terms, they were abandoning a profitable, established business model to chase blockchain, AI, and something Jackson called conscious capitalism. I laughed so hard I nearly choked on my coffee. Our clients were conservative financial institutions and healthcare providers who valued stability and security above all else. They didn't want disruption. They wanted reliable software that wouldn't get them hacked or fined by regulators. A week later, Helios revealed a complete rebranding. The sensible blue logo that conveyed trust and reliability was replaced with a purple vortex that looked like a screensaver from 2003. Their new slogan, Beyond Binary, Beyond Boundaries, Beyond Business. I saved screenshots of everything. My former assistant, Megan, called me around this time. She was one of the few who had my personal number, and I could hear the stress in her voice. "It's chaos, Diane," she whispered, as if afraid of being overheard. "Jackson's fired half the finance team and replaced them with these, I don't know what to call them. One guy's business card says, Possibility Architect." "What about the Hamilton account?" I asked, referring to our biggest client. "They're not happy." Jackson told them their security requirements were energetically restrictive and suggested they consult a corporate feng shui expert. I nearly spat out my drink. He did not. He did, with a straight face. In a board meeting, I felt a twinge of sympathy for Megan and my other former colleagues caught in this tsunami of nonsense. But then I remembered how quickly they'd all adjusted to my absence, how easily I'd been erased. My sympathy hardened back into resolve. "You should update your resume," I told her neutrally. "Already on it," she replied. "Half the company is." The exodus began soon after. First, the CFO, my former boss, resigned to pursue other opportunities. Then the head of product development. The CTO followed a week later. Each departure was painted as a positive evolution by Helios's increasingly frantic PR team. But I knew better. The rats were fleeing a sinking ship. Meanwhile, I wasn't just sitting at home refreshing news feeds. I'd started consulting for some of Helios's competitors, carefully navigating non-compete clauses by focusing on industries they didn't serve. Word of my availability spread quickly, and soon I was earning more than I had at Helios, with better hours and none of the corporate politics. I also made a point of staying in touch with key clients I'd developed relationships with. Not to poach them, I wasn't that obvious, but to check in and maintain professional connections. If they happened to mention their growing concerns about Helios's new direction, I would listen sympathetically and occasionally suggest they might want to include contingency clauses in their contract renewals. 4 months after my dismissal, the first major blow hit. Hamilton Healthcare, the $40 million account I'd secured, announced they were terminating their contract with Helios due to strategic differences. The press release was diplomatic, but the message was clear: they didn't trust Jackson's vision. Helios's stock dropped 15% in a single day. I treated myself to an expensive bottle of champagne that night, sipping it slowly while watching the financial news coverage of the unexpected development at formerly stable Helios Innovations. The next morning, I received a LinkedIn message from Richard Westlake himself. My finger hovered over the delete button, but curiosity won out. "Diane, hoping to get your perspective on some legacy projects? Coffee sometime." The audacity was breathtaking. He wanted my help? After discarding me like outdated technology. I waited a full day before responding with deliberate coolness. "Richard, my consulting rate is $400 2-hour minimum, payment in advance. Let me know if you'd like to schedule something." He didn't reply. 2 weeks later, Helios announced its first ever quarterly loss. The stock dropped another 20%, Financial analysts who had once praised the company's steady growth now questioned its fundamental business strategy. One particularly scathing article in the Wall Street Journal described Jackson's approach as mysticism masquerading as methodology. I printed that one out and framed it. Around this time, Emma started noticing my improved mood. We were having breakfast, pancakes on a Wednesday because I could now be present for weekday breakfasts, when she studied me with the perceptive gaze only teenagers can master. "You're really happy you got fired, aren't you?" she asked. I nearly choked on my coffee. "What makes you say that?" She shrugged. "You smile more. You're home for dinner. And you kind of do this evil genius laugh sometimes when you're reading business news." I composed myself. "I'm not happy I got fired, but I'm happy with where I am now." She nodded, apparently satisfied with this explanation. "Well, I like it better. Your old company was stealing you." Her words hit me harder than she could know. Helios had been stealing me, my time, my energy, my presence in my daughter's life. For what? For a company that could erase me in 3 minutes. In that moment, my revenge fantasy shifted slightly. Yes, I still wanted to watch Helios burn, but not because they had wounded my pride. I wanted them to pay for the birthdays, the school plays, the lazy Sunday mornings they had stolen from me and Emma. 6 months after my departure, the real implosion began. Helios announced it was seeking strategic investment to fuel its revolutionary expansion. Corporate speak for "we're running out of money fast." Jackson had apparently convinced Richard to invest millions in developing a proprietary blockchain platform that nobody had asked for and no clients wanted. Meanwhile, I received a desperate email from Megan. She and most of the remaining original team had been restructured out of their jobs with minimal severance. Jackson had brought in his own people, a collection of self-described visionaries and disruption experts who seemed to specialize in complex presentations and team-building retreats involving firewalking. "They're calling it a conscious uncoupling from legacy thinking," she wrote. Translation: they fired everyone who questioned Jackson's ideas. I helped Megan and several other former colleagues find new positions through my growing network of contacts. Not out of pure altruism, I made sure to place them at companies that competed directly with Helios. Each one took valuable institutional knowledge with them, further weakening what remained of my former workplace. 9 months in, the true extent of the damage became public. An investigative report revealed that Helios had lost 70% of its client base and was burning through its cash reserves at an alarming rate. The blockchain platform had major security flaws, and the new AI initiative was little more than an expensive chatbot that gave motivational quotes instead of technical support. Jackson, predictably, blamed market resistance to paradigm shifts and negative energy from detractors. But the numbers didn't lie, and numbers had always been my specialty. Helios was failing, exactly as I had predicted. I received another message from Richard, this time via email, marked urgent. "Diane, we need to talk. The situation is critical. Name your price." I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I took Emma out for ice cream and asked about her day, giving her my full, undivided attention. Later that evening, after she'd gone to bed, I replied, "Richard, my price is a public acknowledgement of the mistake you made in replacing me with Jackson Price, plus a consulting retainer at triple my former salary. I'll expect your response by noon tomorrow." It was an impossible demand, designed to be rejected. Richard's pride would never allow such a public admission of failure. I knew this, and he knew I knew this. It was my way of saying, "I don't want to save you, I want to watch you drown." He didn't respond. The following week, Helios announced emergency layoffs of 60% of its workforce. Photos circulated on social media of empty offices and employees carrying boxes to their cars. Jackson was conspicuously absent from all company communications. Though Richard continued to insist that the company was realigning for future growth, I ran into one of the board members at a charity gala. She cornered me by the champagne fountain, her face tight with barely controlled fury. "You knew, didn't you?" she hissed. "You knew this would happen." I sipped my champagne calmly. I tried to warn you all about the risks of Jackson's approach. No one wanted to listen to the boring finance lady. He's gone, disappeared to some meditation retreat in Bali, left us with this catastrophe. I raised an eyebrow. And Richard? Still trying to save what's left. Too proud to admit he made a mistake. Too proud to ask for help. I nodded sympathetically, though satisfaction coursed through me like fine wine. Pride comes before a fall, they say. She looked at me with new understanding. You're enjoying this. I didn't deny it. Wouldn't you, in my position? After a moment, she laughed. A short, bitter sound. Probably, God, we were idiots. Yes, I agreed pleasantly. You were. 1 year after my dismissal, the end came swiftly. Helios Innovations filed for Chapter 11, bankruptcy protection. The stock, once trading at $87 per share, plummeted to less than $2. The company that had been my professional home for 5 years, that had been growing steadily under my financial guidance, was now a cautionary tale in business schools. I received a final email from Richard the day the bankruptcy was announced. It contained just 2 words. You win. I didn't reply. There was nothing to say. This wasn't about winning. It was about justice, about consequences, about the natural order reasserting itself after a period of delusion. That evening, I took Emma to her favorite restaurant to celebrate her academic achievements that semester. As we waited for our dessert, my phone buzzed with yet another news alert about Helios. I ignored it and focused on my daughter instead. Mom, she asked, studying my face. Are you okay? You seem different today. I considered the question carefully. Was I okay? The company I had helped build was in ruins. Hundreds of people had lost their jobs. A part of my professional history had been destroyed. And yet, I felt lighter than I had in years. Free of the anger and resentment that had been driving me. I'm more than okay, I told her honestly. I'm ready for what's next. Which is what? She asked, curious. I smiled. I'm thinking of starting my own consulting firm, helping companies avoid the mistakes Helios made. Emma grinned. You could call it not run by gurus. I laughed, a genuine laugh that had nothing to do with revenge or satisfaction at others' failures. I'll consider it. 2 days later, I registered a new business, Mercer Strategic Consulting. My tagline, sustainable success through sound strategy. Nothing flashy, nothing quantum or disruptive, just a promise of solid, responsible business practices. My first client? A venture capital firm that had acquired Helios's most valuable assets in the bankruptcy proceedings. They wanted someone who understood the company's history and could help rebuild its core business on a stronger foundation. As I signed the contract, I thought about Richard and Jackson and all the others who had been so eager to discard proven methods for shiny new theories. I thought about the lesson they had learned the hard way. The lesson at the heart of my new business, that sustainable success isn't built on charisma or buzzwords or quantum approaches, but on expertise, integrity, and patience. I had watched Helios burn, yes, but from its ashes, I was building something stronger, something mine. And that was the sweetest revenge of all. I suppose the story could end there, with neat symmetry and a clear moral. But real life is messier than that. And what happened over the next 2 years added layers of complexity to my tale of corporate revenge. My consulting firm thrived from the start. It turned out that there was significant demand for a no-nonsense approach in an industry saturated with self-proclaimed gurus and disruptors. Companies that had been burned by their own Jackson prices came to me for stability, for risk management, for sustainable growth strategies that wouldn't collapse at the first market fluctuation. 6 months in, I had to hire 5 consultants to keep up with client demand. After a year, that number had grown to 15, and we moved from my home office to a proper commercial space downtown. I was careful about who I brought on, experienced professionals with proven track records, not smooth-talking charlatans with flashy credentials. Emma seemed proud of what I was building, though she rolled her eyes at how much time I still devoted to work. The difference was that now I was building something for us, not making someone else rich. And I kept my promises to her. No missed birthdays, no canceled vacations, no absent mother at school events. 18 months after Helios's bankruptcy, I received an unexpected visitor at my office. My assistant, Jenna, appeared at my door with an uncomfortable expression. "There's someone here to see you," she said hesitantly. "Richard Westlake. He doesn't have an appointment, but he's quite insistent." My first instinct was to refuse, to have security escort him out. But curiosity won out. Why would Richard show his face after everything that had happened? "Send him in," I said, straightening the papers on my desk and sitting up taller in my chair. A subtle power move I'd perfected over the years. Richard looked terrible. The polished executive I remembered had been replaced by someone who appeared to have aged a decade in 2 years. The designer suits were gone, replaced by khakis and a button-down that seemed a size too large. Even his characteristic confidence had evaporated. He shuffled into my office like a man approaching the gallows. "Diane," he said, his voice raspier than I remembered. "Thank you for seeing me." I didn't offer him a seat immediately, letting him stand awkwardly for a few moments before gesturing to the chair across from my desk. "What can I do for you, Richard?" He sank into the chair with visible relief. "You've done well for yourself," he observed, glancing around my office, spacious, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city and tasteful, expensive furniture, success displayed without ostentation. "I have," I agreed coolly. "But I doubt you came here to discuss my success." He flinched slightly at my tone but nodded. "Fair enough, I'll get to the point. I'm starting a new venture. Nothing like Helios, something smaller, more focused. I'm looking for a CFO." I stared at him, genuinely speechless for perhaps the first time in my professional life. Was he actually suggesting, "You want to hire me?" I finally managed, unable to keep the incredulity from my voice. He had the grace to look embarrassed. "I know how it sounds. But yes, I need someone I can trust, someone who will tell me the truth, even when I don't want to hear it. Someone like the person you fired to make room for a guru." I couldn't help the sarcasm that dripped from my words. Richard didn't flinch this time. He just looked tired. "Yes, exactly like that person. I made a catastrophic mistake, Diane. I destroyed something good because I was seduced by promises of something better. Faster. More exciting." He paused, meeting my eyes directly. "I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm asking for a chance to not repeat my mistakes." I leaned back in my chair, studying him. Part of me, a significant part, wanted to savor this moment of complete vindication. To reject him outright and watch him leave my office with his tail between his legs. But another part, the strategic thinker that had always defined my professional approach, saw an opportunity. "I'm not interested in being anyone's employee again, Richard. I have my own company now." "I understand that. What if I came to you as a client? Your firm could handle the financial strategy, and you personally could serve as an advisor." I raised an eyebrow. "At my current rates?" "At whatever rates you set," he replied without hesitation. I considered him for a long moment. The man who had dismissed me so easily 2 years ago was now essentially begging for my help. It should have felt like the perfect conclusion to my revenge story. So why didn't it? Perhaps because revenge, while temporarily satisfying, is ultimately an empty pursuit. Or perhaps because I recognized in Richard's humbled state a genuine opportunity for growth, his and mine. "Tell me about this new venture," I said finally. Relief washed over his face. For the next hour, he outlined his plan. A specialized software service for small healthcare providers, addressing a gap in the market that larger companies ignored. It was modest compared to Helios's ambitions, but it was solid, practical. The kind of business I might have designed myself. "No quantum approaches, no disruption paradigms?" I asked with the ghost of a smile. He actually laughed, a short, self-deprecating sound. "God, no. I've had enough disruption to last a lifetime." I tapped my pen against my desk, thinking, I'll have my team review your business plan. If it passes our assessment, we can discuss a consulting arrangement. But I'll be brutally honest with you, Richard. One whiff of guru thinking, and we're done. That's exactly what I need, he said with evident sincerity. After he left, I sat in my office for a long time, watching the city lights come on as evening fell. I thought about the journey that had brought me here, from the humiliation of being discarded to the triumph of building something valuable from scratch. I thought about revenge and justice and the thin line between them. I had wanted to watch Helios burn. And I had. I had wanted Richard to face the consequences of his poor judgment. And he had. But now, presented with the opportunity to twist the knife further, I found I had no desire to do so. Not out of forgiveness, exactly, but out of a recognition that there were more productive uses of my energy than nursing old grudges. The following week, after my team conducted a thorough review of Richard's business plan, I agreed to take him on as a client. We established clear boundaries and expectations from the start. I would provide financial oversight and strategic guidance, but all final decisions would be documented, with my recommendations clearly recorded, protection for both of us. Over the next year, Richard's new company, Meridian Healthcare Solutions, grew steadily. Nothing explosive, nothing revolutionary. Just solid service delivery and careful expansion. Richard, chastened by his previous failure, followed my advice nearly without exception. On the rare occasions when he pushed back, he did so with data and reasoned arguments, not ego or appeals to mysterious business philosophies. 18 months into our consulting relationship, Meridian was acquired by a larger healthcare technology firm for a respectable sum. Not billions, but enough to make everyone involved financially secure. At the celebration dinner, Richard raised a toast to me. To Diane, he said, glass held high. Who taught me the most expensive business lesson of my life, and then, inexplicably, gave me a second chance to prove I'd learned it. Later, as we waited for our cars outside the restaurant, he asked the question I'd been expecting for some time. Why did you agree to work with me, Diane? After what I did to you at Helios, you had every right to show me the door. I considered my answer carefully. Partly because watching you succeed under my guidance was its own form of satisfaction, partly because your business plan was actually good, and partly because... I paused, surprised by the realization forming as I spoke. Holding on to anger was taking up space I needed for other things. He nodded slowly. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. Truly sorry. I know. I replied. And I did know. Not because he'd ever made a grand apology, he hadn't, but because his actions over the past year and a half had demonstrated a genuine change. He had listened to me, respected my expertise, given me proper credit for my contributions. In short, he had behaved like the leader he should have been at Helios. What will you do now? I asked as his car arrived. He smiled, a real smile, not the slick expression I remembered from our Helios days. Take some time off, maybe teach. There are a lot of eager young entrepreneurs who could benefit from hearing exactly how not to run a company. I laughed. I'd audit that class. After Richard's departure, Mercer's strategic consulting continued to grow. We developed a particular specialty in recovering value from failed disruption attempts, helping companies return to solid business fundamentals after expensive dalliances with business gurus had left them floundering. My personal experience made me uniquely qualified to guide others through similar situations. 3 years after being unceremoniously dismissed from Helios, I found myself addressing a conference of financial executives. My topic, Sustainable Growth in the Age of Disruption. As I looked out at the audience of attentive faces, I spotted a familiar one, Jackson Price himself, sitting in the back row, looking considerably less guru-like in a standard business suit. I felt no anger seeing him there, no desire for confrontation or further revenge, just a mild curiosity about what had brought him to my presentation. I delivered my talk as planned, emphasizing the importance of due diligence, risk assessment, and valuing institutional knowledge over charismatic promises. I didn't mention Helios specifically, though many in the industry would know the story. After the Q&A session, as attendees networked over coffee, Jackson approached me. He looked older, more subdued, though he still wore those meditation beads around his wrist. "Ms. Mercer," he said, extending his hand. That was an enlightening presentation. I shook his hand briefly. "Thank you, Mr. Price. I'm surprised to see you here." He had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. "I've been doing some reassessment of my approach. Your reputation precedes you in recovery consulting." "Recovery from what, exactly?" I couldn't resist asking. "From people like who I was," he admitted, surprising me with his candor. "It turns out that quantum business approaches don't hold up well against market realities. A painful lesson for me and for several companies." I studied him, trying to determine if this apparent humility was genuine or just another performance. "What are you doing now?" "Actual management consulting," he said. "The boring kind, with spreadsheets and risk assessments. It turns out I do have some useful skills when I'm not trying to be a guru." I nodded, still wary but willing to acknowledge that people can change. I had seen it with Richard, after all. "Good luck with that." As he turned to leave, he paused. "For what it's worth, Helios was a mistake from start to finish. You deserved better." I thought about responding that I had indeed gotten better, much better, but decided against it. There was no need to prove anything to Jackson Price. My success spoke for itself. Later that evening, as I had dinner with Emma, now a college sophomore studying business and finance, inspired partly by watching my career trajectory, she asked me about the conference. "How did it feel?" she asked. "Being the expert everyone wants to hear from?" I smiled, thinking of how far I'd come from that bench in Willowbrook Park, clutching my box of office belongings and plotting my revenge. "It felt right," I told her honestly. "Like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." And I was. Not defined by what had been taken from me or by my response to that loss, but by what I had built afterward. My revenge fantasy had evolved into something far more satisfying, a life and career on my own terms, helping others avoid the mistakes that had once derailed my professional journey. That night, I deleted the folder of screenshots and news clippings documenting Helios's demise, my digital revenge scrapbook that I hadn't opened in over a year. I no longer needed those reminders of a company that had burned to the ground, partly through my passive observation and partly through its own flawed choices. 5 years after my dismissal from Helios, I received an unusual invitation to speak at a business school about corporate failure and recovery, using Helios as the primary case study. The organizer, it turned out, was Richard, who had indeed gone into teaching. The students should hear both sides, his email explained. My perspective as the CEO who made the catastrophic decision, and yours as the executive whose strategy was abandoned with disastrous results. I agreed, not out of any remaining desire for vindication, but because I genuinely believed there was value in the story. Cautionary lessons about valuing substance over style, expertise over charisma, and sustainable practices over quick transformations. The event was held in a large lecture hall packed with MBA students eager to learn from a spectacular business failure. Richard spoke first, with remarkable honesty about his mistakes, his susceptibility to Jackson's charisma, his impatience with Helios's steady but unspectacular growth, his failure to value the expertise already present in his company. When my turn came, I didn't focus on personal grievance or satisfaction at being proven right. Instead, I spoke about the broader patterns at play, how businesses become vulnerable to guru thinking during certain phases of their development, how to evaluate advice critically regardless of how charismatically it's presented, and how to rebuild after a significant failure. During the Q&A session, a student asked the question I had been expecting. "Ms. Mercer, do you feel vindicated by what happened to Helios after your departure?" I considered the question carefully before answering. Initially, yes. I wanted vindication badly. I wanted everyone involved to regret their decision to replace me. But vindication is a poor substitute for purpose. What I found more satisfying in the long run wasn't watching Helios fail, but building Mercer Consulting into a success. Afterward, Richard and I had coffee in the campus cafe. There was an ease between us now that would have seemed impossible years earlier. Not friendship, exactly, but a relationship built on mutual respect and shared experience. You know, he said, stirring his coffee thoughtfully, I've often wondered what would have happened if I'd promoted you to CFO instead of bringing in Jackson. I smiled. Helios would still exist, for one thing. He winced but nodded. Undoubtedly. But would you be happier? Would you have built what you have now? It was a question I had asked myself occasionally. Would I have preferred to stay at Helios, climbing the corporate ladder as planned, over the path I'd actually taken? Probably not, I admitted. I likely would have remained a well-paid executive working to build someone else's dream. It took being fired to push me to build something of my own. So in a way, Richard began cautiously. Don't push it, I interrupted with a laugh. I'm not going to thank you for firing me. He laughed too. Fair enough. As we parted ways outside the cafe, he asked, Do you ever miss it? Helios, I mean. Before everything went wrong. I thought about the camaraderie, the shared purpose, the pride I had taken in watching the company grow under my guidance. Sometimes, I acknowledged, but not enough to trade what I have now. What I had now was a thriving consulting firm with 30 employees, a healthy work-life balance that allowed me to be present for Emma, and the deep satisfaction of having built something valuable entirely on my own terms. I had gone from plotting revenge in a park to leading an industry, from defining myself by what I had lost to defining myself by what I had created. The ultimate irony wasn't lost on me. Being replaced by a guru who bankrupted the company had turned out to be the best thing that ever happened to my career. My dismissal hadn't been the end of my story. It had been the beginning of a much better one. I had watched Helios burn, yes. But from those ashes, phoenix-like, I had risen, stronger, wiser, and finally, genuinely free.